Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a product sneak peek / showcase video for this new 1/6 scale early production M4 Sherman tank turret. This turret here is the master for the upcoming M4A1 early production Sherman tank from Plastic Panzers. To get an idea on how much this master was changed from the original raw version, we're going to go back to the way the turret looked when I first got it. Now here's the same turret when the project first started. The turret itself is a rotomold Plastic Panzers M4A3 late Sherman tank turret kit. This is the turret that comes with the rotomold Plastic Panzers M4A3 Shermans, and I have in the past used this turret on several builds. In more recent leaks, if you look back in my video library in my YouTube channel, you will see my M4A3 105 project, which utilized the same type of turret that you see here. For the conversion, well, first off, let's just look at the turret, what you got. If we notice, the turret has the integral 50 caliber split hatch copula molded in, has a molded in recess for the tank's 75mm loader's hatch. Keep in mind that this is the late version of the M4 Sherman. For the to backdate this to the early Sherman format, this hatch will have to be deleted. This here would be the antenna well for the MP48 spring antenna base, and this here is the mount for the secondary antenna if the tank were to have two radios. Also molded into the turret, we have here the ventilator, as well as the loader, or the gunner's, the loader scope, and the gunner scope would be in this location over here. This turret is a improved version from the DeSimone or the JD rotomold turrets. The Plastic Panzers acquired the rights a few years ago from JD to make the M4 Shermans. Before they went into productions, a few small things were changed on the production run. Namely, on the turret, if we notice here that the spot where on the JD turret was a really poorly molded in shell ejection port for the 75mm shells has been deleted, leaving it nice and flush for you to mount a new hatch in its place. The Plastic Panzer kit, I believe, comes with a shell ejection port, and a functional shell ejection port is available from EastCoastArmory.com. And here goes the turret all marked up for all the mods that I need to make to it. The most important mod, as we notice, is the tank's bustle. This turret here is modeled after the late M4A3 high bustle style turret. The earlier Shermans, the bustle was about 3/4 of the size of the later version. So this portion here is going to have to be, the angle on this is going to have to be adjusted, which will in turn lower the bustle. As was mentioned earlier, the loader's hatch is going to have to be deleted, and the split ring, the molded in integral split ring copula will also be deleted. Another thing you'll notice is that I will be replacing the molded in loader scope. I have a better version on hand. A shell ejection port housing will be added, as well as by lowering the bustle angle, I will need to replace the antenna well and the spare antenna mount. Also, as of note, we have here the addition of the smoke mortar launcher, which will have its hole mounted. And we also have noticed here that the tank is missing, or the basic turret here is missing the the gunner's loader scope. The loader scope armored box was integrally molded into the previous JD incarnation of the turret. However, it was very rough and a poor casting, and one of the things that was omitted when Plastic Panzer when he acquired the rotomold kits and started making them himself, was he had this little piece of detail removed. I will in turn re-add the part, and it'll be more to scale with the turret. Another feature about Sherman turrets is that the later version of the Sherman turrets, like what this turret here is supposed to be representing, had an asymmetrical appearance. This was because early in the production run with Sherman tanks, the armor was the same thickness around, except for this portion over here where the gunner was. It was actually had to be a lot thinner. This was because of all of the equipment used for the gunner and his equipment. This was obviously a weak point, and when the Sherman was up-armored in the field or even in the factory, you will notice that they would weld slabs of steel plate to this side of the turret here. Later on in the production run, this was addressed, and Shermans that featured the oval loader's hatch also featured integral molded-in armor on this side of the turret. It's not very visible from the exterior, but there is a small bulge that would have been on this portion here of the turret. You would notice it as if you would take the turret off, you would see a small little lip running along the bottom portion of the turret where the cheek armor extends past the turret ring. Because this is going to be an early war single hatch low bustle turret, that armor is not needed, and coincidentally was not added to the original rotomold casting, so that will actually be beneficial for this conversion that I'm performing to it. One modification that I made specifically to this turret was I removed the early split ring copula that was molded into the commander's portion here. The copula itself, as we saw from the initial videos, was rather rough, and a better resin replacement copula is available through Plastic Panzers. Another reason why I decided to remove it was it gives you now, the modeler, the option to either use the split ring copula if you want to model your tank as an early production or an early service vehicle, or you could update it with the late single hatch copula like from ECA, like this one here, and now it makes your Sherman a later production vehicle in that it's an early vehicle that was subsequently upgraded to later production specs. Detailing that was actually removed from the original turret, as we can notice, was the loader's hatch that would have been besides the copula. The loader's hatch deletion turns this turret in from a late production to an early production. This, along with the lowered bustle and even the rotor drum protection blister here, are several features that are primarily and predominantly found on early production turrets. Another mod that I made to the Turret Master was I modified the way the man will mount to the turret itself. If we remember the portion or the scene of the turret when it was in its raw condition, there was a big plate that was molded into the turret's front here. That plate was so that you could mount on the rotor drum, which this one here is from a leftover from a James D. Simone vehicle. The rotor drum would then mount flush, or mount, not flush, but it will mount over the plate and stick out slightly from the turret casting itself. To make it more like a real Sherman, I went ahead and removed that plate and added this recess for the rotor drum to slip into. The rotor drum, the way it would mount, it would be, you would have this rotor drum here. This one here is from an Armortech, and it would slip into the small little recess that you see here on this turret. You would remove only the center portion and leave probably about a 1/4 of an inch rim along the entire inner lip. This would give you the surface to mount fasteners that would secure the manlet drum to the turret. It's the same system that's done on the real Sherman, and we could see it here on the Armortech version of the turret. The rotomold, or the kit supplied rotor drum, will be able to fit in this recess after a little bit of modification. The reason why I didn't simply just mold in the rotor drum to the turret casting is because, just like with the copula, these Shermans had two different types of mantlet configurations. They had an early style configuration and a late style configuration. ECA currently makes the late style configuration, and the early style and as well as the rotor drums for both styles will be offered once these kits are released. While we're on the front, we also have here a small notch that is in the lower rim of the turret. This notch here is found on all Sherman tank turrets, all 75mm Sherman tank turrets, and what it does is it allows you to get access to the turret ring screws, which are underneath the turret. The rings are held on by large slot screws, and to get access to them while the turret's still on the vehicle, you just rotate the turret and you would be able to get access to all these slot screws. The turret casting does include a molded-in shell ejection port. The shell ejection port you see here is the EastCoastArmory.com version, and the hatch itself is also included with the kit. The hatch itself, though, is slightly different than the East Coast Armory one, in that it is molded into the top recess here of the turret. When building the actual production kit, you would cut this out, and you would cut out the hatch, drill these two hinges out, and you could then mount it to the hatch mount here. Now the hatch has all of its external detailing only. On the top portion of the turret, we have the locations for the gunner scope, the air ventilation unit, as well as a loader scope. Divot for the smoke grenade launcher. On these early Sherman tanks, the smoke grenade launcher was a standard item, and it wasn't until later they started deleting them and just welding them over. This gives you the indentation of where to mount it. As like the smoke grenade launcher, we can see that the details have not been molded into these three locations. For the two periscopes, two basic versions have been supplied with the kit, just like the shell ejection hatch on top. These two pieces of detail here are designed to be removed from this plate and inserted into these two locations. These details here are just to get you off the ground. I plan on offering a update set for this turret, which will include resin cast versions of the shell ejection hatch, which will have both the exterior and interior detailing of the hatch, as well as a replacement resin cast hatch for both the loaders and the gunner scope. Also will be included with the set will be the resin detail centerpiece for the air filter, or the air ventilation unit. As we notice here on the back, we have the well for the MP48 spring antenna base, and the location for the auxiliary antenna in case the tank had two radios. The reason why I did not mold the plate in was because of the molding procedure. The plate probably wouldn't come out all that crisp. Because of that, rather than molding in the plate, I left it off, and the plate itself can be easily scratch built out of a piece of square sheet styrene. The copula portion of the turret has its rain and bullet splash gutter mounted, and it is, just like on the real Sherman, integral to the turret casting. What was purposely left off of the turret master was the model's casting numbers. I felt that with the type of molding procedure this turret's going to go through, the casting numbers might not fully come out. So rather than adding them, this is something that the modeler can add later himself, using plastic numbers and letters. To get an idea on what the turret will look like when mounted to a vehicle, I placed the turret master on top of a production fiberglass version of the M4A3E2 Jumbo, which is another Plastic Panzers kit. As of note, this turret is not intended to be used on this hull because the Jumbo was an up-armored version of a late M4 Sherman and had its own special turret that was supposed to be fitted to this hull. And that concludes this sneak peek / unboxing video for this 1/6 scale M4 Sherman early production 75mm turret. Stay tuned for more 1/6 scale tank builds, as well as 1/6 scale detail upgrades. Also, don't forget to stop by and like us on Facebook, as well as checking out EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 scale builds and 1/6 scale detail components. Thank you.